Starting first virtual machine in Azure Cloud. So in this section, I'm going to show you how to spin up Windows or Linux virtual machine in Azure Cloud, right? From scratch, from basic. So Azure virtual machine is one of several types of on-demand scalable computing resources that Azure offers. Typically, you choose a VM when you need more control over the computing environment than the other choices offer. Because spinning up virtual machine means like infrastructure, right? So backend hardware, physical networking, storage, that's all like Microsoft Azure responsibility. But operating system maintenance, administration, configuration, patching or Windows update, right? That's all customer responsibility. So Azure VM gives you flexibility of virtualization without having to buy and maintain the physical hardware that runs it, right? However, you still need to maintain the VM by performing tasks such as configuring, patching, and installing the software that runs on it, right? So first step here is like sign in to the Azure portal. So https://portal.azure.com, and before that, even like if you have not Azure account, you have not any subscription associated with Azure account, so obviously you won't be able to spin up virtual machine. So the first task is like creating account, Azure account with email ID, and then subscription, right? At least one subscription linked with the account, and we can use free trial subscription, right? So before spinning up virtual machine, definitely you should have Azure account, a subscription, either free trial or pay as you go or partner offer, right? And then just search there like for virtual machine in the basic tab under project details, make sure the current subscription is selected and then choose to create a new resource group. Detail like reason, image size, administrator account, name, password. So critically, I'm going to show you how to spin up virtual machine in Azure Cloud. But before that, let's first understand like network infrastructure, right? Before spinning up virtual machine, there should be network infrastructure in the cloud, and then only we would be able to spin up virtual machine, right? So just I'm going to give you high level overview of network resources, and then I will take you to the Azure portal. I will show you how to spin up Windows virtual machine. All right. So before spinning up virtual machine, there should be virtual network, right? So first, virtual network. Virtual network is basically isolated network space in Azure cloud, right? It's just like a network. And when we create virtual network in Azure cloud, then network address, major network address is required there, right? For example, 10.1.0.0/16, right? In networking section, we'll understand what is virtual network, VNet peering, regional, global, routing, right? I will explain the whole concept of virtual networking in Azure Cloud. For now, you should understand VNet is just a virtual network, a logical data center, a logical space in the cloud, right? And then at least one subnet is mandatory. So virtual network should have at least one subnet, and subnet is subset of virtual network, right? So subnet can be 10.1.1.0/24. So at least one subnet minimum, one subnet in this virtual network. And obviously there can be multiple subnets. And then third step, routing. right? So routing table associated with subnets would have default route pointing to internet gateway, right? And then network security group, NSG, right? NSG is very similar to access control list, but access control list is stateless, not stateful, whereas network security group is stateful virtual firewall. So network security group is stateful virtual firewall, right? So in network security group, we create inbound and outbound security rule to control traffic, inbound and outbound security rules. What traffic should be allowed outbound, what traffic should be allowed inbound, right? So network security group consists of inbound and outbound security rules to control traffic basically, but mandatory. And basically this network security group can be associated for subnet at subnet level and also at network interface card level, right? NIC card of the virtual machine, right? So before spinning up virtual machine, there should be virtual network in the cloud, at least one subnet, routing, and network security group, right? But what if we uh, don't want to create virtual network, subnet, routing, and network security group? Straight away, let's say I want to spin up virtual machine in the cloud. So would that be possible? Yes. So even if you don't know anything about networking, right? And of course, like first time we are going to spin up or create any resource in the Azure portal, right? And I assume you don't have any knowledge about uh, virtual network, subnet routing, network security group, right? Because I have not covered so far. We'll see all like networking concepts in networking section, right, of this course. But for now, if I assume that you don't have any idea, you don't have any knowledge, you don't know how to create virtual network, how to create subnet, how to configure routing and network security group. So can we then spin up virtual machine? Yes. So what happens, right? So basically, in Azure, by default, a virtual network is created when we spin up virtual machine. So by default, a virtual network is created, right? And there is predefined network address 10.0.0.0/16. One default subnet is created /24, right? System route, yes. Routing, a route is automatically created, a default route pointing to internet gateway, right? Default route means any network address, any subnet mask via internet gateway or internet. So this route is by default created and associated with the subnet. Network security group, yes, it is created at the time of spinning up virtual machine, and by default all outbound traffic allowed, and inbound again depends. If we are going to spin up Windows virtual machine, Windows, right? Then by default, RDP, that is TCP port 3389 is allowed. In case of Linux virtual machine, by default, SSH, that is secure shell, TCP port 22 is allowed. And in case if we are spinning up appliance from marketplace like Palo Alto Firewall, F5, or any other appliance, then both HTTPS and SSH both are allowed. Right, ping is also allowed to the management interface. So basically, these are some default, like ports or protocols allowed in inbound security rule. Right, outbound, as there is no restriction, unrestricted access. Inbound, yes, there will be a restriction. But yes, we can modify this network security group even later on, once like virtual machine successfully spinned up, and later on we want to modify, edit inbound security rules. Yes, that is possible. We can do that. So let us assume that we are not very much aware with the networking in Azure cloud. We don't know what is NSG, routing, subnet, VNet. straight away we want to spin up a virtual machine in cloud. So yes, we can do that. By default, a virtual network is created, subnet is created, routing is done, network security group is also created, and that can be modified or changed anytime. Even routing can be changed or modified later on, right? And what other information you need to be aware of before spinning up virtual machine? Resource group, right? So resource group is basically is a container, and resources are contained in a resource group. Resources, for example, network interface card, disk, right? Even this virtual network or subnet, etc. So they all are what resources. Even like the public IP is also resource. So resource group is a container, and resources are placed in a resource group. Without creating a resource group, you cannot create any resource in Azure Cloud. So can we create multiple resource group? Yes. Can we put all resources in one resource group? That is also possible, but not recommended. For example, let's say you want to put resources uh, of production like network environment in one resource group, production network resource group, and for testing and trial you want to create another resource group, right? And you want to put resources used in testing, trial, in fact, in this resource group. And once testing done, then definitely you'd be interested in deleting those resources. So in case if you want to get rid of those resources mainly used in testing purpose, so instead of deleting is individual resource, what you can do, you can delete resource group. Container resource, container is like the folder, in fact, right? Resources are very much like files. So if you delete folder, that means all files of that folder will get deleted, right? So resource group is nothing, it's just a container, right? You can create multiple resource group. So resource group, yes, also required apart from this networking. And then subscription, yes, without valid subscription you cannot spin up any virtual machine. Reason also, in which reason, like we want to spin up virtual machine, right? So straight away I'm going to take you to Azure portal and I'm going to practically show you how to spin up first virtual machine, right? All right, so it's my Azure account, and I can just click here virtual machine to create a new virtual machine from here, like add it here in favorite. I can use search option, or even I can click here to get like list of all resources. So there are multiple ways, right? So I can click here, I can select virtual machine from here this way, right? Virtual machines, I can use search option, virtual machine, right? And even like added here frequently accessed resources or as a favorite, right? So on this page, just click here create and then Azure virtual machine, first option, right? Azure virtual machine. And here there are different tabs: basic, disk, networking, management, monitoring, advanced, tag, review, and create, right? First one is the important one, first tab, that is basic tab, right? So here, like first option is selecting subscription. So since I have only one subscription, that is free trial. So even if I click here, so I will not get like other option here, right? But in case if multiple subscriptions are associated with Azure account, so here This will show all available subscription here, maybe one free trial, another pay as you go or partner offer, right? So a single account can have multiple subscription, but I'm using a free trial. There is only one subscription, so I don't have any option. Next option is resource group, a container, collection of resources that share the same life cycle, permissions, and policies, right? So creating multiple resource group is always recommended even for administrative reason, administrative purpose. Later on, like we will create policy in Azure Cloud. And at the time of applying policy, we select a scope. Whether we want to apply policy at subscription level, resource level, right? Or maybe at account level, root management group, in fact. So from that perspective, also like grouping resources in appropriate resource group is strongly recommended. So I'm going to create a resource group here. So you can name it like resource group 1 or any meaningful name here, just the name, and then virtual machine. So I'll name it VM01 and then reason, in which reason, right, we want to spin up virtual machine. So you can select any region, right? For example, if you know like your customer, your clients are in US East region, right? So definitely you should prefer spinning up virtual machine in US East region. Okay. So as per the use case, you can select the region. And then here, infrastructure redundancy, right? Availability zone means like multi-AZ feature within the same region. If there are three availability zone and you want like three virtual machines to be spinned up in three different availability zone, and then you will put like load balancer in front of those three virtual machines. So definitely you should select this option, right? Availability zone means if my plan is to spin up three servers, right? For example, VM1, virtual machine 2, virtual machine 3. And here, a load balancer, application load balancer, right? And all three servers like running the same web application. So if you put all three servers in same region and in same availability zone, right? In the same region and same availability zone, reason, and in there is only, for example, one availability zone, means cluster of data center. So if anything happens with that specific data center availability zone, means all three virtual machines would become unavailable, right? So best practice is like spinning up one virtual machine in one data center, right? AG, availability zone 1, another virtual machine in the next one, and the third one in third availability zone, right? So definitely this will provide availability zone redundancy, right? So same reason, but three availability zones connected with low latency optical fiber cable. So one virtual machine here, another virtual machine here, and the virtual machine here. Actually, there is no reason specific redundancy if something happens in the entire region, like let's say US East region. So definitely all three data centers or cluster of data center, rather, I would say, or availability zone will get affected, right? So no, then redundancy at all. But for that level, we have Azure Site Recovery option here. So we can utilize that. We can create a replica of this main data center or infrastructure in any different region, right? For example, if we are spinning up virtual machine, maybe network, subnet, routing, everything, firewall, load balancer in US East region. So a copy of all resources can be placed in US West region, right? Very much like designing DR site. I'll show you later on how is done. So definitely you should select this option, infrastructure redundancy, availability zone. VMSS is like something, let's say, again here there is a load balancer, and initially you want to start with maybe one or two virtual machine, right? And later on, you want horizontal scaling, right? Horizontal scaling. Let's say objective is to spin up additional virtual machine in the same group. Of course, if CPU utilization of like server like has reached to 75% or above, right? So what we want that virtual machines, additional virtual machines should get automatically spinned up, added to this group. And even we can set maximum threshold limit, maximum number of virtual machines, for example, 10 or 20 or 30, right? That is possible. And that's what VMSS is. So basically it is auto scaling feature, auto scaling feature. And the third option, if you look at the third option here, is availability set. Third option, right? Here, this one. What is availability set here? Automatically distribute your VMs across multiple fault domains. So if I select this, let me, if I select availability zone, so yes, like it's asking like in which availability zone I want to spin up this. Maybe first virtual machine in zone 1, then the next one zone 2, the third I will spin up in zone 3, right? And the next option here we have is VMSS, virtual machine scale set. You'll see this VMSS later on, right? And the third option is availability set. And here we have option to create a new availability set. And if you look at this option, fault domain, then update domain, is a bit confusing here, right? What is fault domain? What is, and if you take a mouse over there, so virtual machines in the same fault domain share a common power source and physical network switch. And what is update domain? Update domain is virtual machines in the same update domain will be restarted together during plant maintenance. Azure never restarts more than one update domain at a time. So there are two options here like fault domain and update domain. Fault domain maximum 3 and update domain maximum 20, 20, right? If I just take it here, 3 update domain, 3 fault domain. So what is exactly fault and update domain? So let me explain this. So uh, it's a Microsoft data center. There are different network rack, right? First network rack, another network rack. I'm taking only 3 network racks here just to give you a high level overview of what update domain and fault domain. So we are trying to understand meaning of both fault and update domain. Update domain is a bit confusing, right? So now this is rack, network rack 1, network rack 2 in the data center, and network rack 3 in the data center, right? Network rack. In each rack, there is one here, let's say physical server here, physical servers, physical servers, physical servers, physical servers here. Let's say one physical server here, one physical server here, one physical server here. Physical servers means this machine is running some hypervisor, because we understand that virtual machines that we spin up in Azure Cloud is not a physical, right? It's all like virtualization. And for that virtualization, there are different softwares available like VMware product, ESXi, Microsoft is Hyper-V or KVM, Linux, right? So a lot of hypervisors, right? Hypervisors play a very important role in virtualization. So on this physical server, let's say this is server 1, right? Virtual machines are created, right? Physical bare metal server. Physical server means this one is bare metal server, hardware server, bare metal, and running some hypervisor, right? And rack 1 2 3 means what? Rack 1 2 3 means like different fault domain. I will use a term fault domain, fault domain, and fault domain. There are three fault domain, right? Fault domain 1, fault domain 2, and fault domain 3. And different fault domain means like different power source here, even like internet, right? So almost like facilities are like different for different racks. So if something goes wrong with the main power source even, so only rack 1 will get affected, not other two racks. They all definitely would be using different power, different internet cabling and all that, right? Just to provide high level of redundancy. Now what Microsoft does, even these physical servers are grouped together and known as update domain. And what do we mean by update domain? Update domain, let's say update domain 1. So update domain means during maintenance, right? Servers, all servers of same update domain will be restarted, right? Means server 1 here, server 2 if I take, server 3 if I take physical servers, right? Bare metal servers. So they all will be restarted together, right? Because if Microsoft has done grouping this way, I mean like uh, servers on top of the rack are in update domain 1, so they all will be restarted one time at a time, right? And then these there is another update domain, right? This way. And I've taken just example of 3 update domain and 3 fault domain. So this is update domain 2. We will see this like the whole concept critically also later on. And then the third update domain, right? So this is another update domain here, this way, update domain 3. So now there are 3 update domain and three fault domain, update domain 3, right? Now if I'm going to spin up 3 virtual machine, right? 3 virtual machines, and let me take different color. So okay, black. So 3 virtual machine 1, virtual machine 2, virtual machine 3. And initially what I did, I created availability set with 3 file domain and 3 update domain, right? It's a group, availability set group with 3 file domain and 3 update domain, right? And now I'm just spinning up 3 virtual machines in the same availability set. So what will happen behind the scene? One of the server will be spinned up here, one server, right? Virtual machine, of course, on this physical server, file domain 1 and update domain 1. Another virtual machine will be spinned up here, file domain 2 and update domain 2. And third virtual machine here, right? So now if there is any issue with the power, with the internet, means if there is any issue with one rack, let's say with this rack, so still these two racks, file domains, is still operational. My virtual machines will be up, right? Even if Microsoft has planned to restart servers falling in update domain 1, right? So still my server 2 and 3 are in different update domain. So what if you have just selected three different file domain but no update domain. Let us assume hypothetically, not possible, right? Because when we create availability set, then both options need to be selected, mandatory option. But let us assume that there is only concept of file domain. Forget about update domain, or you have not selected. So in case if virtual machines like are split up this way, first virtual machine here, second virtual machine, and third virtual machine. So there is redundancy at file domain label, rack label, network label, but update domain, since they all like all three physical servers running hypervisor virtualization software are in the same update domain, and if there is a planned maintenance, right, that means Microsoft has planned to restart physical servers, right? So they all will get restarted at a time. Means you will not have any virtual machine available at that time, right? So that is why you should do this way. I mean, like if you want to select infrastructure redundancy, so definitely you should have multiple file domain and multiple update domain, right? But still, they all are in the same availability zone, in the same region, in the same availability zone. In the same availability zone, there are different network racks. So better if you select multi-AZ. But what if a specific region, right, has only one availability zone, only one availability zone, right? Means there is only one availability zone in that region. So obviously we cannot select this multi-AZ concept. The limitation is from the Azure side that you cannot have more than one availability zone in that specific region. Let's say there is a region ABC, and this region has only one availability zone, right? But you want infrastructure redundancy. So at least you should create availability set, right? In the same availability zone, in the same data center, at least network level, means selecting different file domain, different update domain, yes, you would have redundancy. So that's the meaning of update and file domain, right? I will show you practically also later on, right? But for now, I hope you understand like what is the meaning of availability set here. So we are not interested in any infrastructure redundancy. So what I'm going to do here, so here I'm going to select no infrastructure redundancy required option, right? Security type, yes, I want to go with the standard basic level of security for your virtual machine. There are some advanced confidential also. We'll see that later on. Image. Image means like whether we want Windows, Ubuntu, or any other platform. Let's say we want Windows Server generation 2, right? VM architecture x64, perfect, and uh, size, right? So whether 1 gig or 3.5 gig, two virtual CPU. So I want to go with this high-end standard, two virtual CPU, 16 gig of RAM, right? So even you can click here, see all sizes, will show like sizes available in that specific region, and then username. So I'm going to select username here. It's an admin account basically, Azure admin, and then and you cannot use any reserved name here. You cannot use administrator root, something like that is already used somewhere or internal uses purpose, right? Password. So you'll have to meet password complexity requirement, length, alphanumeric, special character. So keep that in your mind, right? So I'm just giving here password. So match this, right? And then inbound port rule. This is what network security group is, NSG. Select which virtual machine network ports are accessible from the public internet, right? So inbound. So by default, 3389 RDP port is by default allowed incoming and from any IP address. We can create a restrictive network security group, right? And we'll see that later on. Creating network security group, customize network security group. So for now, I want to go with the default selection, that is default RDP 3389. Licensing, even save up to 49% with a license you already own using Azure Hybrid Benefit. So for enterprise customers, even Microsoft is offering 49% discount, right? If they have already license, Windows license. Hit down next year, disk. So Azure Disk Storage Encryption automatically encrypts your data stored on Azure Managed Disk. So here, if you look at the option here, this tab, disk tab, in fact. So by default, this type is premium SSD and key management platform managed key. So basically, data at rest is by default encrypted, right? By Microsoft. Means let's say it's Microsoft storage device, right? So data here is safe, encrypted. You don't have to worry with that. But if you are spinning up a virtual machine and attaching a virtual hard drive, virtual disk with it, premium or SSD or any disk, with this virtual machine, let's say 500 gig virtual disk attached with the virtual machine, you are saving data on the disk, files, folders, right? So data is not encrypted here, right? By default, if you want to encrypt this disk, 500 gig disk, the disk space taken from here from the storage, so you'll have to do then Azure disk encryption, ADE, using BitLocker technology. We'll see that later on, right? Means data at rest is encrypted, secure. But if we create a logical disk like the virtual hard disk and attach with the virtual machine, we keep files, folders on the virtual hard drive, that is not encrypted. So because it's again confusing, right? Because at first place we see that, okay, there is by default encryption. Microsoft is using default encryption key. So why do we do then ADE, Azure Disk Encryption? Because this disk is not encrypted, right? So that's where like this ADE comes into picture. Anyway, so on this page, I'm not going to do much here. So in case if I do not want premium SSD, then I can go with this standard also. Anyway, premium SSD is much more faster. Key management platform managed key, but this is data at rest, in fact, like managed by Microsoft, right? So just I want to go to the next page, that is networking, very important. So first tab and this networking tab, they both are very important, right? So as I mentioned before, that before spinning up virtual machine, there should be virtual network in the cloud, at least one subnet or maybe two or three subnets, routing even, right? Network security group. So without virtual network, without subnet, without routing, without network security group, we cannot spin up virtual machine, right? But what we did, we just clicked here like virtual machine, new virtual machine, right? I've not followed step by step. Otherwise, like step by step is what? First creating virtual network. So create virtual network in cloud, then create at least one subnet in the virtual network, then network security group. And if you want routing table manipulation or customization, then user defined routing. Once you have done with like networking part, right, then you can obviously spin up virtual machine. But since we have not created any virtual network subnet network security group by UDR, so see here on this page, we see the option here, create new. So if we want to create, then even we can create from here also. Even virtual network subnets can be created upfront, right? So I could have done that before like spinning up virtual machine. That's another way from here also. And even if you don't do anything, so see here, by default, a virtual network is going to be created new by default, and the name of virtual network is what? Resource group name dash virtual network. This is the resource group name, and then virtual network. And network address by default /16. One subnet is by default created, and the name of subnet is default 10.0.0.0/24. In enterprise network, in production environment, definitely we would never prefer this creating virtual network automatically. And why? Because in a production environment, like we create multiple virtual networks, right? Multiple virtual networks, maybe two, three, or four different virtual networks. So if virtual networks are created by default automatically, so they all would have same network address, right? Virtual network 1, virtual network 2, virtual network 3, and even the subnet address 10.0.0.0/24. So all three virtual networks, if they all are using same network address, so if we want that they all should communicate internally by using private address space, right? And the connection that is created here is known as VNet peering. VNet peering. We'll see the lab demonstration of this VNet peering also later on. So let's say we want like different virtual networks should communicate with private IPs by using Microsoft backbone network infrastructure, even if they are in different regions, not like routing packet via the internet cloud. We don't want this. So that is possible. We can create VNet peering, but address space should be non-overlapping. Means different virtual networks should definitely use different network addresses, right? So in production network, in enterprise level, we never spin up virtual machine, or we create resources by using default virtual network, default subnets. No, but since the very first time we are interacting with Azure portal, the very first time I'm showing you how to spin up virtual machine. So far, we don't know what is virtual network. We don't know what is subnet routing and all that. That's why we are not going step by step, right? Or let's say even if let's say you are in a hurry and quickly you want to spin up a virtual machine in cloud, you don't want to like spend time in creating network infrastructure prior of like spinning up virtual machines. So yes, again, this is the best option. At least this would be done automatically. So select that, and then the so what I'm doing like here, I'm not changing anything. Even here also I can like create new virtual network. I can create new subnet, and this is the name of the resource. Public IP is not IP address, just see here is the name of the resource. A public IP is, yes, automatically assigned to the virtual machine, but this is the resource name, right? IP address, we really don't know like what IP address will be assigned to this virtual machine. So virtual machine that we are spinning up VM01 would definitely have one public IP, DHCP assigned public IP, and one private IP, DHCP assigned private IP. Private IP address from this range, right? And initial three, four IPs and the last IP all are reserved, right? Five IPs per subnet reserved. So the first available IP address will be 10.0.0.4, right? So private IP, yes, 10.0.0.4 will be assigned to this virtual machine. Public IP, we don't know. It's like any IP address, globally routable IP address. And the name of that resource that is created would be VM01. That's IP. I'll show you once like created. And then network security group, basic is okay. Public inbound ports. So I can see here public inbound ports, right? Okay, network security group, inbound, yes, it's all good. So now just go to management. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud is enabled by default in my subscription. That is why showing your subscription is protected, right? But by default, Defender for Cloud is disabled, right? A security feature. So we'll see this Defender for Cloud later on. And on this page, you don't have to do anything. So just we can go to the next one, monitoring. Monitoring boot diagnostic enabled with managed storage account. So if you want to turn off boot diagnostic, then you can disable this option. But if it enabled, then it is enabled, then uh, better for like troubleshooting. Advanced tab extension. So even extension can be installed later on. For example, in case if we are using Azure Monitor, maybe some like vulnerability assessment. So extension or agent software is installed automatically, right? We can also do manual installation and can be done later on also. So we don't want to install any extension for now. So we can go to the next tag. Tag is again not mandatory but recommended, right? It's a name value pair that enables you to categorize resources and view consolidated billing. So you can use you can use tag in filtering option also, right? To do the segregation, like bill segregation. So recommended that you should give a name value pair or tag. Even with the help of policy, we can enforce this option that resource cannot be created without giving a tag, that is name value pair. I will show you in Azure policy section. So that is also possible. Even like resource is created, later on we can create policy and we can create some remediation uh, policy in fact, right? That resources in a specific resource group should have a specific tag, name value, like name, organization name, let's say network, anything like that, right? So, and the last one is review and create. So review means like verification, right? So once it is successfully done, then we will hit down create. So you can see resources are getting created, like virtual network, network security group, IP, and this is the last one, virtual machine. So generally it takes 5 to 10 minutes. So your deployment is complete, right? So it took around 5 to 7 minutes, right? So you can see here deployment succeeded. And now if I click here, go to resources. So and then networking tab here, network. So you can see here private IP address 10.0.04 and public IP address 20.28.190.82. So we can use public IP address to take remote desktop connection or access of the virtual machine with this public IP address, right? Routing is done automatically. Public IP is assigned, and if quickly I show you the routing, so known as system route. So you can just go to select the NIC card, network interface card, this one, VM01230 is the NIC, network interface card, and here effective routes. So by default route is created, known as system routes, right? We can modify routing table, we can do customization, we can create user defined route, but by default this route is by default created. Next hop internet, root is active, and source is what? Default system route. So because of this default route, this virtual machine is connected with the internet, because there is one route here, default route pointing to internet. Internet is something like internet gateway. So this way, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to access this virtual machine with the public IP address, right? So you can copy this public IP from here, right? Control C, and then I'm going to RDP. So public IP connect, username Azure admin, and then the password. Alright, so virtual machine is now accessible, right? So I hope you understand how to spin up virtual machine in Azure Cloud, right? In next section, I will show you troubleshooting, basic troubleshooting. What if virtual machine is not accessible via RDP, right? You are unable to take RDP access of the virtual machine in the cloud. So what are different troubleshooting steps? I will show you that.